Hi, Jakey Stief here, the long-haired freaky dude. Today I'm reviewing The Passion of the Western Mind by Richard Tarnas. A stupendous overview of the history and the evolution of Western thought. Lately, I've really been wanting to read some of the great philosophical and political works which have shaped our world, such as Plato, Locke, Smith, those sort of guys. Before I jumped in, however, I wanted a sort of overview of these topics. My knowledge of philosophy and their ideas was next to null. In history class, one is taught the names and dates associated with ideas, but not the ideas themselves. For instance, I knew Plato and Aristotle had opposing views, but I couldn't tell you a single thing about what either one believed. So I wanted some sort of foundation onto which I could build my future philosophical knowledge. A context into which I could put these ideas, to know what their importance was to the world. Something, of course, not covered in the actual work itself. And how all of these ideas interplayed with each other. How they were connected, tied together, and influenced one another. So, this is the book that I was recommended to read before I jumped in. The book I was recommended to read to build that foundation. I was actually recommended and given a copy of this book by my brilliant German professor. Thank you, sir. He is incredibly knowledgeable of Western thought, so I took his word that this book would be able to achieve just all of that. And surprisingly, indeed it did. I went in with the hopes of building a foundation, and a foundation is exactly what has been built, a very firm one at that. I usually don't care for the reviews on the back of a book, but this one actually sums up the book quite nicely, so I'll go ahead and read it to you. Here are the great minds of Western civilization and their pivotal ideas. From Plato to Hegel, from Augustine to Nietzsche, from Copernicus to Freud. Richard Tarnas performs the near miracle of describing profound philosophical concepts simply, but without simplifying them. 10 years in the making and already hailed as a classic, The Passion of the Western Mind is truly a complete liberal education in a single volume. And really, I do feel like I now have a working idea of the philosophies of Plato, of Augustine, of Nietzsche, and so on. It all makes sense now. Definitely a great starting point for anyone who wants to pursue a liberal education, or the great books of the Western world in general. And might I suggest taking the Great Books Challenge, which you can find right here. Richard Tarnas' writing is simple, elegant, and indeed carries the reader with the momentum of a novel. The history itself is compelling enough, but Richard Tarnas extrapolates this fact and constructs an incredible narrative of Western thought. He divides the book into 6 major sections, or epochs of thought. Greek, pre-Christian, Christian, medieval Christianity, scientific revolution, and finally the emergence of modern thought, modernism. And I really want to talk about the incredible things that I learned from each of these eras. Things I had no clue about. Like how large a role the philosophies of Aristotle and Plato played in the development of early Christian thought. Who knew? Or how dreadfully depressing modernism and postmodernism is. But this is a review of the book, not a review of the history. If you do want to talk about the history though, well, feel free to start a discussion in the comments section below. I'll be more than happy to join in. Anyways, typically with a book like this, with so many different ideas, with so many different beliefs, one must automatically assume that the author is going to be biased towards something. You know, usually that bias is a blistering pimple, something really easy to spot. You know, since it's history, I figured this bias would be in his own era, for modernism. But I read the first few chapters, which were on Plato. And I had this strange feeling that the author had this peculiar vibe with the ideas of Plato, that they were in some sort of agreeance with each other. It's just the very style of writing was very positive towards the ideas of Plato. So obviously I thought Aristotle was going to be portrayed in a negative light. But I got to him and a very curious thing happened indeed. Once I got to his part of the story, it was Aristotle who was presented in a positive light and Plato who was antagonized. Then we got to the development of Christianity. Both sides of that were presented positively and negatively. Then we got to the scientific revolution. Both sides of that positively and then negatively. And so on. To say that this book has no bias would be wrong. But to say that it's biased towards any one idea, well, that'd be wrong too. Tarnas does the incredible job of being biased towards everything. His bias assumes the role of whatever idea he's currently talking about. This formidable style of writing really did reveal both sides of each period of thought. I don't know how he did it, but he did. And it was magical. Thank you, Tarnas. With that said, this book only focuses on Western thought, as the name suggests. And perhaps rightfully so. For a long time, the Western world has been self-guided, having little interaction with other cultures. With the possible exception of Christianity being brought out of the Dark Ages thanks to interaction with Islamic Muslims who gave them Arabic copies of ancient Greek texts, which the clergy had until then managed to successfully suppress. Now, however, many ideas from many cultures are all coming together, all melting together. You have Eastern cultures, tribal cultures, all coming into one conglomeration. And he indeed points us out that modern Western thought is starting to become entangled with Eastern roots. So if you're wanting to jump into philosophy or liberal education of some sort and want an overview before you do so, this is the perfect book to read. It's interesting, it's compelling, it's fun. It's not like a textbook at all. It's not like you're given a table of concepts with all their definitions. No, you are given a story. Our story. So my questions to you are, do you know of any books which are the Eastern equivalent of The Passion of the Western Mind? What books, thoughts, and ideas would you include in the Eastern mind, and how do those differ from the Western mind? The Western canon is largely a developing conversation, as philosopher Mortimer Adler put it. Which of today's emerging ideas will become part of the conversation? Where will the great conversation go next? Well, I'm Stief, the long-haired freaky dude. If you like this video, be sure to hit that awesome thumbs up button down below. And if you want to see more great videos such as book reviews, cooking tutorials, or headbanging to classical music, then might I suggest hitting the subscribe button. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to direct those in the comment section below. However vulgar down there, anything goes. And if you like reading philosophy, literature, or works of science, things of that nature, then might I suggest taking the Great Books Challenge. I'm sure it's something you'd love to do. Well, I'm Stief. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video.